You ever just get overwhelmed with all the self-help stuff out there?
Yeah.
Like, you're drowning in it. Books, podcasts, courses. Like, yeah, I get it. I need to help myself. But can someone just tell me what actually works?
I know exactly what you mean. It's like everyone's promising the moon and the stars.
Exactly. And that's kind of what got me interested in this whole guided self-help thing.
It's definitely a buzzword these days. So what are we diving into today to help make sense of it?
Well, there's this new paper everyone's talking about, a guide for self-help guides, best practice implementation.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. It's pretty comprehensive, right?
Right. And it's not just some theoretical thing. It's based on actual research and clinical experience, which I find really interesting.
I think that's what drew me to it, too. It's like they're taking all that research and saying, okay, so how do we actually use this?
Exactly. So for someone like me who's heard of guided self-help but maybe doesn't totally get it, break it down for me. What is it exactly?
Okay, so the paper starts by making it clear that guided self-help, it's not therapy.
Yeah.
It's not about the guide being some kind of therapist light.
Okay, so none of that just think positive stuff.
No, not at all. This is about you, the client, taking the reins and having more of an active role.
I like that.
It uses your strengths, and it's tailored to what you specifically need.
So how does that work? Is the guide like leading you through exercises or something?
Kind of. They're more like a facilitator, you know.
Facilitator, okay.
They help you apply the program to your life. The paper uses this analogy of a cheat sheet. Yeah, but not a cheat sheet for the material itself, but for how it applies to you. Like, they know this stuff backwards and forwards.
So they can pinpoint what you should focus on.
Yes. They know what's going to be most relevant to you and your challenges.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand the difference a bit more. So it's more like having a personalized roadmap rather than just being handed a stack of maps and told to figure it out yourself.
Exactly. It's about making the material work for you, not the other way around.
So let's say I'm sold on this and I want to give it a try. What should I be looking for in a guide?
That's such a good question because it can feel kind of overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know if someone's legit?
Yeah.
The paper really emphasizes finding a guide who's got a deep understanding of whatever program you're using.
Okay, so it's not about them having read every self-help book out there.
Right. It's about them knowing the ins and outs of that specific program.
That's reassuring to know. You want someone who really knows their stuff, not just winging it.
Yes. You want someone who can say, like, hey, remember that section we covered on challenging negative thoughts? Let's try applying that here.
Oh, I like that they're connecting the dots for you.
Exactly.
This is already making so much more sense. I'm really starting to see the value.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface.
I know, right? Now I'm really curious to dive into what an actual guided self-help session looks like in practice. Okay, so let's get practical. What's it actually like, being in a guided self-help session?
Well, don't expect a therapy couch and mood lighting or anything.
So no gong baths?
Probably not.
Yeah.
The paper actually emphasizes shorter sessions.
Really?
Yeah, more like 20 to 30 minutes, not a full hour like you might expect.
Huh. See, I would thought more time equals more progress.
I think the idea is you're not starting from scratch every time you meet.
That makes sense.
A big part of guided self-help is all the work you do beforehand, so the reading or journaling exercises.
Oh, so you're coming in prepped.
Right, so that way you and the guide can really jump into applying the stuff you've learned.
It's less about just taking in information and more about actually putting it into practice.
Yeah, more targeted, more action-oriented. And the paper really emphasizes that the agenda should be driven by you, the client.
Oh, I like that. So it's not like the guide has this set plan and you're just along for the ride.
Exactly. They might have a framework, but it's really about what you need most from that session.
Okay, that's reassuring to know. So how do they actually make sure that happens? Like, is there a structure to these sessions?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The paper actually suggests guides could use email templates.
Email templates? For what?
Think reminders about your sessions, summaries of what you discussed, links to the next week's material.
Oh, that's smart.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's all there waiting in your inbox.
That would definitely cut down on those frantic, what was I supposed to read again moments?
Exactly. And it frees up your mental energy to actually, do the work during the session.
Yeah, because who wants to be scrambling for notes when you're trying to have a breakthrough?
Right. So it's all about maximizing those 20 to 30 minutes. But remember, this is a framework, not a rigid set of rules. The key is finding that balance between structure and flexibility, always making sure it works for the individual.
So it's kind of like having a personalized workout plan, but your trainer can adjust it based on how you're feeling that day.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Which, speaking of adjustments, life throws curveballs, right? What happens when things don't go exactly according to plan with this whole guided self-help thing? That's what I was thinking. Like, life happens. So what about when you hit a wall? Does the whole thing fall apart?
That's where having a guide can be really helpful, actually. The
Yeah.
paper actually talks about this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it has a whole section on troubleshooting.
Okay, so what are some of the common challenges people run into?
Well, lack of engagement is a big one.
Makes sense. I mean, motivation comes and goes with anything, right?
Exactly. And sometimes life just gets in the way too, you know?
Oh, totally.
And it can feel overwhelming, the material. But the paper really emphasizes that this is normal. It's not a sign that you failed or anything.
Right. It's not like, oh, I'm off track. I might as well just quit.
Right. It's more like, okay, this is a bump in the road. How do we navigate it?
So what do? Talk it out with your guide?
Exactly. Sometimes it might just be adjusting the pace or, revisiting some of the earlier stuff.
Just that little refresher?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's literally just acknowledging, hey, life is a lot right now.
Totally. And that kind of makes me think about people who are dealing with more than one challenge at a time. Like, what if the program's focused on, say, building confidence, but you're also going through a tough time at work,
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the paper actually uses the term co-occurring difficulties.
Co-occurring difficulties. Okay.
So it's basically, when there's more than one thing going on in your life that needs attention.
Which, let's be real, is probably most of us.
Totally. And it's easy to feel like you have to put everything on hold to work on just one thing. But
Right.
this paper really emphasizes that you don't necessarily have to do that.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's about working with your guide to figure out, okay, how do we address all of this in a way that feels balanced?
So it's that middle ground, not ignoring those other challenges, but also not letting them completely derail the work that you're doing.
Yes, exactly. Now, there's another challenge that they talk about in the paper that I think is really interesting. They call it self-help drift.
Self-help drift, what is that?
Okay, so imagine you're like, I'm going to try this new restaurant. I'm going to be adventurous. But then you end up at the same takeout place down the street,
I've been there.
It's like even with the best intentions, we can kind of get off track.
We fall back on old habits.
Right, and this can happen with guides, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where they might kind of unintentionally drift away from the program's methods.
Interesting. But also kind of concerning if you're the one being guided, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's
And
right.
so how do you prevent that from happening?
That's where supervision comes in for the guide.
Oh, okay.
So it's like having a coach for your coach, essentially.
to keep them on track.
Exactly. Because it's so easy to get sidetracked,
Right. And I guess that's important for any kind of teaching or guidance, right? You need someone to kind of be checking in and making sure you're not veering off course.
Totally. And I think that brings us to a really, really crucial point about guided self-help, and that's realistic expectations.
Oh, say more about that.
This whole paper, it's about setting people up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is understanding that it's not a magic bullet,
It's not a quick fix. Yeah.
Exactly. And like you were saying before, life happens, there are going to be ups and downs, and it's not always going to be linear progress.
That's good to remember for really any kind of personal growth.
Exactly.
This has been so interesting. I feel like I actually understand guided self-help now, and I'm kind of excited about it.
Me too. I think it has a lot of potential.
So any final words of wisdom for people who are maybe thinking about dipping their toes into the guided self-help waters?
Yeah, I mean, do your research, find a guide who really knows their stuff,
Definitely.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, what's your experience? How do you approach this? Do you have a supervisor? It's about finding the right fit for you.
It really is like any important relationship, right? You got to put in the effort, you got to communicate, and you got to be willing to navigate those bumps in the road together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been great. Such an insightful deep dive into the world of guided self-help. And for anyone listening, remember, you are the expert on your own experience. And as you continue on this journey of self-discovery, we hope you find the guidance and support that you need to thrive. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.